which you see that in sparring and rolling a lot,
Yeah.
where somebody's emotions get the best of them, and they don't all of a sudden get better,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, you get angry or you get upset or you get scared or whatever. That doesn't result in all of a sudden you being more proficient at fighting.
Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the mats and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges. I'm Amber Hoover. I did that in one take. And I like to stick to the plan.
I'm Ryan Hoover, and I don't really understand why you like sticking to the plans, because it doesn't ever work.
Yeah, you would think I'd have learned by now.
Like, expectations, you know, should lead you to kind of navigate things differently, I would think. But
yeah, but
here we are.
There we are then. No, not that. All right.
Where your feet are.
Yes, that part. There's a moment in a sparring or rolling round where you're deep into the action. You've gotten through the awkward feeling out process and you're letting your training guide you. And it's right there in what feels like a battle for your life that you actually have no idea what you're doing. And if someone asked you afterwards, what did you do? You won't have any answer for them. Am I right so far?
I don't know. I wasn't listening. Her face is so expressive. Like, she was saying a lot of words, but I was just listening to her face.
My face is pretty loud. To the uninitiated, this may sound reckless, like you weren't paying attention and you were just guessing and throwing with no rhyme or reason. But what's actually happening is quite the opposite. You're not guessing, you're not out of control, you're just not thinking about it the way you think you would be. You're not actually physically having to think, they're doing this, I'm going to do that. And so your body is making decisions faster than your brain can really explain and justify them. You're adjusting, you're reacting, you're solving problems in real time. And a lot of that never makes it into your memory. So when the round ends and someone asks you what happened, now your brain has to go back and try to think about it and build a story. And that story is usually based on how it felt, not what actually happened. And this is where a lot of people start getting it wrong, because in the middle of that round, there's this feeling of out of balance, there's this feeling of things being off or different or shifting, but that doesn't mean you're out of control. And if you think that those two are the same thing and you start reacting like the same thing, that's when we see panic. That's when we see people pull back. That's when we see people shut things down that actually needed to happen. And that's when you really lose control. So the problem isn't always what's happening, it's how you're interpreting what's happening. And that gap between the experience and the story you tell about it after is what we're going to get into today. Because that shows up everywhere, in how you remember your training, in how a parent and a coach can watch the same moment and see it very differently, in who you think you are, the situations you face, and the story you build after the fact about them. And that's what our podcast is about today, since you asked.
Wow, we're 3 minutes in and she hasn't stopped yet.
You're welcome. I'm going to see how this does. If we get a lot of views, it's me. If we don't get a lot of views, it's me.
Then I can stop doing these.
No. Anyway, I wanted to tell you this story to lay this out as a start so that people who listen to this, who I think largely train, they've experienced this in-fight action where they're going hard, they're letting their training guide them, and they're not actually thinking about the moves. And a lot of times, especially as you start learning, that can be kind of scary because it feels like you're out of control, but that's not true. And what this experience gets me thinking about is the difference between being out of balance and being out of control. And you use that dichotomy, that duality when you teach, especially when we talk about kicks. So if you'll start us off, talk about how those two things are different, because to many people, they probably don't sound that dissimilar.
Yeah. When I use it in the context of kicking, you know, with some regularity, people, especially the newer folks, will say, I feel off balance when I kick. I feel out of balance when I'm kicking. And I'm like, yes, you're standing on one leg and you're taking the other leg and you're throwing it out away from your body hard and fast. There's going to be some level of being out of balance. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're out of control. You can be out of control when you're kicking, but I can be out of balance and still have control of what's ultimately going to happen with my body, right? Now I can throw a kick with reckless abandon with no regard whatsoever for inertia and gravity and kind of how that kick is going to finish, and then yes, I'm out of control. But those things don't have to go hand in hand. I think to kick effectively, there's going to be some measure of being out of balance. But it's going to be ineffective if you are also out of control. Because you're going to get that one kick, and maybe it lands, maybe it doesn't, but everything that happens out of that after that is probably not going to be something that you get to dictate, that you get to choose, because you're choosing to move in a way that doesn't set you up for whatever the next thing is going to be. So a lot of this, when you're, in that 3-minute monologue, it made me think of like unconscious competency.
Yeah.
The idea of I'm doing things, not really thinking about them, but they're based on training experiences or life experiences that I've accumulated over time that allow me to, the analogy I give all the time is driving.
Yeah.
When you first learn to drive, you are hyper aware of everything. Every movement you make is intentional. Your brain is telling your hand to go here and to go here and to ignore that and don't touch the radio and don't carry all conversations and make sure you pay attention to this car over here and this car over here and you're on the speed limit and whatever. And then after 6 months, you're paying attention to none of those things. You're going 70 miles an hour. You're changing the music. You're having a conversation. You get to school or you get to work and you don't remember the drive.
Yeah.
That ultimately is I think the goal when it comes to what we do, whether it's fighting or self-defense, in that I'm not making conscious thoughts about, he's getting ready to throw his right hand. I need to get my left hand here and bring it to the center of my face, move my feet, let my left foot lead, my right foot. I've been hit 18 times before I go through that process, If I have to think about every little movement that not only I make, but the other person makes, then I'm going to lose every time. And so we want to get to a point where, yes, at the end of a training round, and this happens with me a lot, especially in rolling, what did you do?
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
I'm like,
how did you set that up?
I have no idea. And 9 times out of 10, I'm like, I don't even remember that,
Yeah.
And maybe that's just because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and my jiu-jitsu is just not jiu-jitsu. But I think a lot of it is you get to a point where you're going through motions that are so embedded in who you are and how you move that there is no conscious thought process happening. Your body recognizes an energy, it based on that energy that has occurred thousands of times before, it's going to move and respond in a certain way.
If we take what we looked at for kicking and apply it to the ground, if in jiu-jitsu you could just go through a roll like a kata, like you do this thing and this thing and this thing, and they follow the exact plan that you had set for them, and then you do the thing, you probably could finish and remember it. But it's because you get knocked off balance. And by that, I don't mean you could be literally knocked off balance. You're inside control and you got tossed over to more of a kesa. But it could also just be you go for an Americana and they shut it down as an off balancing, and you have to react. And so it's harder to process that and put it into any kind of short-term or long-term memory because you're not thinking about it, you're feeling and you're acting like you're saying. And you brought up a good point with the unconscious competency.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting
I think that's the final stage
shift.
of that kind of.
So you've got unconscious incompetency where you don't know what you don't know. And then you start
Which that's any of us starting anything new.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you start getting to a conscious incompetency where you start realizing like, oh, I can't do this. And so we're we're telling you to keep your hands up, or we're telling you to get your base wider or whatever, and you know these things, but you still just can't do them yet. And so you finally move into a conscious competency where you are thinking about these things and you're able to make your body do it, but it isn't autonomous yet. It's not a feeling out process. And I think as coaches, we devote a lot of time to helping people understand those next movements. But then that last shift is entirely on the person. And I mean, we can see it as coaches, but it's going to take a longer time, and it's going to be more of a feeling for them than like a specific, oh, here's the line where you switch into this unconscious competency and you just do it. And so I think there's a tendency for some people to almost get like scared by that. Yep. They don't realize that you're doing jiu-jitsu. Like, you've hit this level. They're like, I don't know what I was doing. I was just going for it. Like, what happened? And it's like, this is a good thing. This is a next step.
Well, and I think that from a pedagogical standpoint too, sometimes it's scary for, not to get too far in the weeds, but you know, the distinction between being a coach and being an instructor. Yeah. I think instructors are scared of getting outside of that if this then that kind of a way of presenting information, because you are relinquishing control of the room, of the class, of the prescriptive nature of the lesson, you know. Yeah. And so while that last stage is mostly up to the individual, I think with the proper coaching, you either increase the chances of somebody getting to that stage, or you decrease the chances of somebody getting to that stage, or at least lengthen it. Yeah. Because if I'm always giving the answers, they're never going to get there. Right. You know, they're never going to experience that unconscious competency, because it's always going to be, they ask me a question and I take their hand and I place it where it should be. Right. You know, instead of them feeling that, or instead of them missing it, losing it, and then in after action figuring out why that happened.
Coaches have to shift, good coaches should shift their teaching style as you progress through those levels. Unconscious and competency, I'm going to do a lot more here, put your hand here, let me help you feel this, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And as you progress through those levels, you move from being more hands-on to verbal cues and things like that until you progress. And that's anything. That's weightlifting too, you know? Like, sometimes you're physically moving their body, putting them in the right spot, and then you're giving them cues so that they can remember what it felt like for me to put them in the right spot, until they just get under the bar and they, you know, press it themselves, kind of thing. This first little segment, out of balance versus out of control, is kind of looking at perspectives on different things. And while the person in the moment might think they were out of control, they might have very well been just off balance. And there are some benefits that happen from that, because that's how you feel and react and fight. You're going to be out of structure, out of balance, out of position, given a different energy than you were expecting, and you've got to adjust to that. Yeah. And that's where you stay in control, right, versus letting it snowball.
Well, and as the opponent or the partner, I am actively and sometimes consciously trying to get you out of balance and ultimately out of control. You know, trying to get you to do things that are going to draw you out of your structure, draw you out of your ability to control what the next thing is going to be. You know, at higher levels, I'm trying to get you to make mistakes. Yeah. You know, and those mistakes usually are ultimately based on getting you out of balance and out of control. Yeah,
out of balance, and then your response to that being
out of control,
going one way or
right.
the other.
I get you outside of your comfort, your
zone,
structure, and then your response to that is usually the out of control part, if I'm successful on my side.
Some of the best fighters, like within our gym, that I've ever gone up against, are very hard to get out of structure. And if you watched them, you wouldn't be like, wow, that dude's really good. You would probably think the opposite, because they'd be like here the whole time. But when you're fighting that person and you're throwing low and high and kicks and mixing it up, and they're just like Terminator, like set, this is what I do. It's like, man, what do I do to this person?
Yeah, there's, and sometimes I think that's a conscious decision. You know, they are purposely not changing their affect. Mm-hmm. You know, their face never changes. They don't have outward tells. Like, even if you hurt them, they don't show it. you know? There's
What's that like?
there's something that can be very demoralizing about that on the receiving side. You know, when you're giving somebody your best and you're not drawing them out, you're not getting them out of their structure, you're not getting them off balance either physically or mentally, emotionally. You know, in martial arts, especially judo, jiu-jitsu, whatever, you hear the term kazushi, which is about physically getting somebody off balance.
Yep.
But there's more, I think there's more to it than that. And I think that's what we're talking about here is it's not just about a physical imbalance, you know. A physical imbalance, we talk about breaking somebody's posture to break their balance, and then that leads to, you know, takedowns or whatever. But there's an emotional and a mental imbalance that if I can start chipping away at that, that's where you start to get people responding out of a lack of control, because a lot of people will panic and stress if they feel out of balance, off balance. And I'm not, again, not just talking about physically.
Yeah, no.
They mentally, emotionally start to feel like they're losing whatever is happening in front of them, which causes them to a lot of times overreact in an out of control kind of way. And if the other person is able to stay composed and in control, that imbalance between the two is stark. Like you can see that, you can feel it as an observer, you know, not just the physical part, but the mental, emotional part. You can start to physically see somebody losing control.
I'm about to change an entire portion of how I teach with this idea of emotionally unbalancing. Like, emotionally unbalanced sounds wild, and yet here we all are walking around out there. No, but that's a great point. We just had a... Ladies
I'll be here for the next hour.
Yeah, uh-huh. So we just had a kids belt graduation in Gastonia, and I promoted 2 kids up into some higher ranks into the reds, which for us, there's a few belts in that section before they get their junior black belt as a child. And these
don't add us. It's a junior black belt. They go to the adult class. They start over. We don't care. Go F yourself. Like I don't care what you think about kids and black belts and junior black belts and whatever. Like I don't give a shit.
That we'll save that for another episode. But so they've put in a lot of time, and I mean even more time than most. They started with me in the junior program, which is ages 4 to 7, and they've both been in the impact program for at least a few years. So I mean from there, so we're talking 4 or 5 years of training, which at their age is like half their life. And one thing I noticed about both of them, and I said this to the group as I was promoting them, is that their affect, their demeanor, you would have no idea how much fun they're having on the mat, which is frustrating for me, but I know they're having a good time because their face is just stoic. They are in there and they're just doing that thing. And the fact that they've kind of found that point where they can just kind of own their skills and their movements and do what they're doing and have that demeanor about them at 9, 10, I mean, that's incredible.
The person that I first really saw this from and was like, it was kind of an epiphany for me was Royce Gracie in the early UFCs. He always looked the same. It didn't matter if he was on bottom getting pummeled. Like his affect, his fate, it just never changed. And it was very, like you couldn't draw him out of structure, even though like in today's MMA, his structure would not be good, but you couldn't draw him out of it. He had this same kind of pace and cadence and way he carried himself, and that's the first time I remember a conscious thought about how that must feel for the other person.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And since then, like I have made it a mission of mine to, when I'm sparring or rolling or whatever, I try really hard not to give the other person anything when it comes to how I look. I might be dying on the inside. You know, I might be thinking, this is horrible. I've never felt this dominated before in my life, but I don't want to show that.
I try to. You just can't tell. Okay, so I want to continue into like a next perspective comparison, which is the experiencing self versus the remembering self. And I think the fight world is a great way to see the differences here, because you really recognize in the moment how you're feeling, how you're experiencing a match or whatever it is, and then a month down the road, a year down the road, whatever, you're thinking back on that situation and you remember it entirely differently. The experiencing self lives moment to moment. It's judging, how do I feel right now, right in this moment? And the remembering self evaluates the past. And so it's more of a storyteller. It's constructing memories from maybe some key moments, but it also leads into what we call, like I'm part of it leads into hedonic adaptation, which is our tendency not to like remember these really high highs and really low lows. Like we tend to more even it out as we go. And so in the moment on the mats, you're dying, it's terrible, you're getting choked every second, every time you turn around. But if you think back on that round, you don't remember it so vividly. You don't feel that same thing. And this is the reason that I mostly quit jiu-jitsu every class and then I start back the next day, because my experiencing self is like, this terrible, but I know my remembering self is going to be like, it wasn't that bad, you're okay, go back to class.
I don't have the science to back this up, but I feel like that can go both ways.
Yes. I have the science. Keep going.
Okay. You know, I feel like somebody can have this experiential kind of self in the moment, you know, this is awesome or this is terrible or whichever. And then in retrospect, depending especially I think on the personality type, we can hyperfixate on everything that went horrible, yep, or hyperfixate on everything that was awesome. And I think both of those have some pros, but probably more cons. If I'm hyperfixating on the highs, then I am less likely to experience growth opportunities because I'm ignoring the lows, which are where the lessons tend to be. Or the flip side of that, which I think a lot of times is what leads to people quitting a thing, is hyperfixating on everything that went wrong, even if it wasn't really wrong, you know. And some of that I think becomes again an expectations game. We've talked about this before, where if I go into it recognizing and understanding, especially if I'm new to something, I'm probably going to lose more than not. You know, I mean, look, even, and I don't know baseball for shit, but I think if you're a 300 batter in baseball, that's probably good.
Yes, I think so.
Well, in most things in life, we would think 30% of something is not awesome. You know, like if driving, I wrecked 7 times out of 10, we would not consider that to be a good driver, you know. And so I think it's, if we set proper expectations, you know, if I'm new to baseball and I'm thinking, well, I should be hitting 9 times out of 10, then yes, you're going to experience a lot of lows, you know, and you're probably going to quit really, really quickly, you know, because if you're new, you're probably going to get 1 out of 10. Yeah. It's going to be upside down, you know.
There's like a self-preservation that kind of kicks in with this idea too, because you will remember some things very vividly. Yeah. I don't know a single person who hasn't at some point gotten some kind of sickness or food poisoning and either never went back to that restaurant or like barely ever ate that food again, even though you know logically, I'm sure I'll be fine. It's so like strong in your mind. And so your expectations can create that because it feels like this huge hit against you or whatever, that you thought you could be at this level, and when you started you weren't. So that's, I mean, managing expectations is so important for that you don't even see where it can cause problems down the line.
For sure.
So I think what you're talking about as well connects into narrative identity, the stories you're telling yourself around the situations. I'm not going to go into all of these. However, if you're bored today, there's a lot to narrative identity, more so than just, okay, well, what's the story you tell around your situation or whatever. It's the trends in your narrative identity. So if you tend to find resolution in your stories, coherent positive resolution is the coding for it. And so there's a pretty big rabbit hole on how that goes. And that's one of the things that I enjoy a lot in terms of teaching kids is helping discover what their narrative identity is and help form it into something positive with good outcomes and good resolution. Experiencing self versus remembering self. I'm not ready to move on.
Okay.
We did talk a good bit. It's interesting because the paradox here is we have to prioritize the remembering self for making decisions. Like, because typically in the moment, I don't really have control to make decisions based on this one thing. Typically, if you think you have a bad day at work and you go to your boss and you're like, I quit, and they accept that and you're gone and you're done, that would be a really bad thing. But typically, that's not how society is structured, and that gap allows us to lean
Well, that's how
more on
toddlers
rebelling
do
self.
things.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
Like, there is very little remembering self in a toddler. It's,
Yep.
I'm here in this moment. This is what I feel. This is how I'm going to respond.
Yep.
And you see that some in teens as well. I think you get these kinds of peaks and valleys as people age and mature, and it's not. I don't think it's like this.
Yeah, surely not. Most things aren't.
No, and so as reasonable, rational, functional adults, we would hope that most of us are operating from this kind of a standpoint where I recognize, okay, right here in this moment, this is a bad experience, but I'm not going to throw away everything that I've built or done based on this one moment in time.
Yeah. And then that helps us make better decisions as we move to relying on our remembering self.
We'd hope.
For some people.
Yeah.
The other thing that kind of comes up within this duality of sorts is a duration neglect. The remembering self doesn't acknowledge really the length of an experience. So like a short, intense, happy event can be maybe remembered better than like a long, lukewarm, not as great, because it's more of the emotion than the time frame.
Yeah.
So that's another just interesting thing as you're moving through life, relying on thinking about your match or your roles or whatever it is, that duration gets kind of lost within it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in life, everybody's experienced some level of that. I don't know, maybe you take a vacation or something, and 5 years down the road, you forget how much of a pain in the ass it was going through the airport and having to check this thing and that thing, and you only remember the really big fun parts, and then you're like, we should do that again, and then you book it again, and you're like, oh my God, like I forgot how terrible this was.
Almost everything I pulled up relating to these talked about like vacations as a great example, and it's in here on this outline. People are like, yeah, you choose to repeat a vacation that was enjoyable in memory, but the experience itself was stressed and you got in a fight all the time and all this kind of stuff. Yep. Yeah.
We had so
Vacations are a
much
great
travel
example.
this year. That's immediately what came to mind for me. We're getting ready to go to Copenhagen, and actually when this airs, I guess we'll probably be in Copenhagen.
We will.
And that I love Copenhagen. We had a really good time there. But I know the process, because it hasn't been that long since we were in Lithuania, and just the process of getting from point A to point B it's a nightmare, and it just continues to get worse. But if we were 5 years removed, 6 years removed, I'd probably be less inclined to think about those things.
Yeah. That's why people say that a lot, like, well, in 5 years, is this going to matter? And there's some validity to that as advice, but it's still really hard to sit here and imagine thinking back on it. The game I like to play is, okay, let me sit here and think about something that was a year or two ago and what I remember about that and what stands out and what am I forgetting? Like, really how long were those intense highs or lows or whatever, that sort of thing. And then I can maybe try to jump forward and think back on it. But it's really difficult to do. Yeah.
I think we've talked about this before, but Amber's ideas of games and normal people's ideas of games don't really align very well.
Like thought experiments. Yeah. No, it's true. They don't.
I'm thinking Uno.
Well, good. We'll add that to the list. We started in this out of balance, out of control type of idea, the experiencing self versus the remembering self. Talked about narrative identity and how you could literally be different people and the situation be different, but you would actually have to think about it and construct your own story differently, which makes me think of a quote. It's typically attributed to Dr. Wayne Dyer, and it's, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Okay.
Did I say that right? Kind of close. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's what narrative identity makes me think about, because like that's common advice. Like people will throw that quote out there and, you know, be like, well, change the way you look at things you look change. And then it's like, but how do you really, you know? And that's, we've talked about this before, where it helps to have outside people who aren't yourself trying to force this other viewpoint on you, because it's really difficult when you've, again, created your whole narrative identity and you've been speaking to yourself the same way for years. And now all of a sudden you're just change the way you look at it. Like, it's not as easy as it sounds. It takes a lot of cognitive process and usually some outside help saying, well, what if we look at it this way?
Yeah. Not to harp on it, but I think a lot of this can be managed and mitigated by reframing our expectations. You know,
No, you're right.
If we look at self-defense, self-protection, we spend a lot of time on understanding body language, understanding being able to kind of read and assess what's happening, and hopefully being able to control variables in a way to where it never gets physical. And each layer of that goes away, the closer we get to physical, the harder it becomes, right? The more variables increase, the harder it is for me to simply deal with whatever this is, because I've allowed it to go so far that now we're forced into a physical altercation. And this is similar, I think, when you're to the point where you're saying, well, just change the way you look at it, it's almost too late.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
If we have that conversation beforehand,
Yeah.
and we change the way that we look at our expected outcome or our expected results, and we're not looking through rose-colored glasses, and we're not going into it with this idea of it's going to be this.
Yeah.
And then when it's not that, there's going to be some level of disappointment or whatever it is, and then somebody coming along and saying, well, just change the way you look at it, is a lot harder to do. But if we preempt it by framing and managing expectations, I think it's a lot easier to work through that. What?
You just unlocked, I think, like some childhood trauma for me. No, like, what I started thinking about and what I started realizing was, as a kid, I did Taekwondo and I did all of the like tournament circuit kind of thing. So every weekend we were driving somewhere and I was competing. And by that I mean every weekend I was trying to give my dad MapQuest instructions and it didn't go well. I was always confused. Anyway, we always made it to the tournaments though. The prep beforehand was win, you know, and then I wouldn't win. And I'd be disappointed, frustrated, angry. And as you know, my face does not hide this. And my body as a child did not hide this. And I'd get upset. And like, I didn't do anything like crazy, but like just in my actions and demeanor, you could see it. And my dad would get upset with me and I'd have to do push-ups. And I'm like, this was not helping. You can't tell me to win. And then when I'm upset that I win, be mad at me for being upset.
Yeah.
And then think push-ups is going to solve my behavior.
This is not an easy thing for me based on my personality, but my advice to kids anytime we've gone to a tournament is have fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's it. Have fun. Because ultimately, end of the day, whether you leave with a medal or not doesn't matter. Even the even the tiniest little bit does it make any difference at all. What matters is, did you enjoy your time there? And did you learn anything? And I think you are much more likely to experience both of those things if we're framing it that way beforehand. If I try to frame it afterwards, you know,
you missed it.
It's gone. I'm never gonna break through with that person, you know, who's still hung up on, well, you know, I should have this, or why did the ref say that, or, you know, this person, you know, I'm never going to get through that. But if I preempt that, and on the front end, as the coach, I'm controlling as many variables as I can, right?
Right.
And I understand that every match, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose.
Has to be that way.
That's just how it's going to be. And so I don't know what the percentages are going to be for my kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So what can I control? Well, I can control the way they think about
Their mentality
what
entering what we're doing.
Yeah. And it's not like at 10, you know,
losing this match is going to ruin their record, and they're not. Yeah.
Right. Like,
what does it really
like,
impact? Yeah.
The win for me, for a 10-year-old, is they went and did it.
Yeah.
That's the win.
Yep.
You know, they went and did something that most adults are never going to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the win.
Yep.
You know.
Oh yeah.
They signed up. They convinced their parents to let them do it. They got in the car. They went all the way over there. They looked around. They saw all these people. They waited for hours and hours and hours, and they dealt with whatever anxiety might come with that, nervousness that might come with that, adrenal dumps that might come with that. That's the win.
Yeah. Everything before touching hands and after touching hands at the end is like the big part of it.
Yeah. The podium, I think, is the least important part of that whole process.
I agree.
And I think we really screw kids up when we don't look at it that way.
The science is really clear here. Kids learn better and quicker when they have fun and enjoy something.
Yeah.
Like, period, hands down.
Yeah.
We know
and again,
that,
look, this is not my personality. I am hyper competitive. I don't like to lose.
Well, for you, if I said have fun,
and-
you'd be like, yeah, winning is fun.
Yes, 100%. But I'm not sure that that's a healthy, I don't know. I'm not sure that that's a healthy mindset mentality. I think it kind of just depends on context.
Yeah.
You know, if you are never able to have fun outside of just winning, then that's probably a problem.
Yeah.
And again, the stakes matter. You know, a 10-year-old in a grappling tournament that they're going to do a couple times, there's no stakes there, not really.
Yeah.
You know, and so when you're the adult in the room, I think it's incumbent upon you to frame it in a way that the kid understands. I'm proud of you just for doing this.
Yes.
You should have fun with it, and the what happens afterwards, like whether you're on the podium or not, I don't care. I'll raise your hand. You know, like
yeah. Because this is highly led into this section that I considered omitting, but we're not now. Parent versus coach perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I onboard kids into the gym, I let the kids know my job is to coach them, and that's going to be to correct them, to let them know when they're doing something right, you know, evaluating, analyzing, all of this stuff. Parents' job is to cheer them on, be a support. And what you're saying right now, like, it frustrates me when parents don't even like lean into that idea where it's like, you don't have to train them and tell them what they did wrong and all of this stuff. And for the most part, you shouldn't. Like, you have asked a professional to lead your child through this journey, let them do it, and you just be there to celebrate and be proud of them for doing it. And that perspective, I think, is, I know it's hard for parents to go hands off. But we had an incident this week where the parent perspective from my coaching was, I'm rude, disrespectful, not paying attention kind of thing. And from my perspective, it was, this is the process. This is, you know, where we are in this moment for your child.
Right.
And so it's tough, but it's a very different perspective to understand.
Well, and it's the wild thing about that is, you know, and I wrote an article on this not too long ago. I recently had one of the winningest NFL coaches of all time bring his son here to work with me. And he came in the door, the dad came in the door calling me coach. He sat right here in this chair. And I went out here and worked with his son, and he didn't interject. He didn't offer up advice. He didn't tell me how this could relate to football or how I could do it better to make it work for football better. He took some videos to send to his dad, and he shut up. And he called me coach again afterwards, and he deferred to me throughout. And this is a guy that, you know, until just very recently, had one of 32 similar positions on the planet, Again, he's, I think, number 3 or 4 in all-time winningest percentages in the history of the NFL. And he also has a wrestling background. He also, like, it doesn't just relate to football.
Yeah. He's trained with you before doing very similar stuff to what his kid was doing.
And had me training his team.
Yeah. But he wasn't sitting here coaching.
But he wasn't, at no point did he interject. He deferred to me throughout. That's why they were here.
Yeah.
You know, and I get, as a parent, I think most of the time it's well-intentioned. You know, they're coming at it from a place of they want their kid to do well. They want their kid to be involved and engaged, and they want to be involved and engaged to a degree. But what they don't understand more often than not, and we have this conversation in our coach development courses, I have a process.
Yes. That part.
I know what my process is.
Yep.
You don't know what my process is.
That part.
There's a reason that I'm saying certain things and not saying other things. I didn't forget to say this, you know. I didn't accidentally omit something. I'm leaving this out for a reason.
Yes.
I am giving you these 3 things that I want you to work on as opposed to these 6 things or whatever it is. I am choosing to isolate this and not worry about that. And so if you're kicking the way I want you to kick, but your hands are down, I don't care.
Right.
In this moment.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't need somebody on the sidelines to say, keep your hands up.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't want them to think about that right now.
Yeah.
I want them to think about what I'm asking them to do. And I understand that when you're not actively involved and you just want what's best for your kid, and maybe you're looking at it and you're like, well, there's 25 kids in the room and, you know, she's not seeing this or he's not seeing that or whatever. I promise you,
we're seeing it.
We're seeing it.
But we are picking our battles.
Yes.
We know what,
I'm gonna drop another article, I think next week, that breaks down basically the ultimate kind of conclusion is your kid is going to devote about 10 hours a day to school. In getting ready, prep, going to school, being at school, going back home from school, doing homework, getting clothes ready for the next day, whatever.
Yep.
And in that 10 hours, they're going to get about 10 minutes of actual devoted, dedicated time personally to them from a teacher or a combination of teachers. Because a teacher if they've got 30 kids in their class and they give each one 90 seconds of individual attention, they don't have enough time. Like, they can't.
That's it. You're out of class time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there have to be processes in place that allow you to teach as many as you can under the restraints that you have. We have the go ahead.
Well, then you look at like an 8-hour school day, and now we're putting this into a 45-minute class.
Right.
It's going to be a few seconds of personal interaction.
And we understand that it's going to be some measure of progressive resistance and some measure of ecological training, where some of it is going to be them having to figure it out on their own. And if I'm wanting them to figure it out on their own and you're continuing to feed them the information from the sidelines, you're actually working against what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
No matter how well-intentioned you are. So, parents, as respectfully as possible,
yeah.
We got it.
We got it. That's funny. That's all I said. I said I got her. Those are the 3 words I said that unleashed a whole thing.
She's not bothered by it at all.
Obviously, I'm over it.
She's clearly gotten past it. She let it go. No lingering, animosity whatsoever.
Definitely didn't help inform the outline of this podcast at all. I am moving on, though, at least for now in the podcast. The last perspective that I want to look at, and it again relates back to the change the way you look at things idea, is the disposition versus the situation. And I took an AP Psych class in high school, and one of my remembering selves highlights that stands out is my teacher, Chuck Lightsky, standing at the front of the room going, "You get a flat tire. What happened?" And then he goes, "An air-containing device no longer contains air." And the few times I've gotten a flat tire, I've been like, An air-containing device no longer contains air. That is the situation. It is external. It is very simple to look at and be like, oh, all right, well, there's the problem. We have a very clear solution. Let's go. The hard part is the disposition we tend to feel, which is the internal response of, I'm late from work, I'm going to be in trouble, I got to go pick up a kid, I don't have a jack, I've got to do this on the side of the road, it's the middle of all of these different things that go into it. But having those two perspectives is important. You're going to probably start with a disposition anytime something comes around, but being able to take yourself out of it and see the situation for what it is helps you make better decisions.
Yeah, because almost always those dispositions are going to pull you further and further away from solution.
Yes, that is the out of control. Disposition is the out of control. Situation is the off balance.
Yeah.
Like, yes, this isn't good, but we can fix it. Yeah. We can respond to it.
Yeah, it's emotional regulation, being able to recognize, all right, this sucks, this is a problem, whatever, but not to allow your emotions to pull you so far from resolution that nothing happens or the situation gets worse, which you see that in sparring and rolling a lot, where somebody's emotions get the best of them and they don't all of a sudden get better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You get angry or you get upset or you get scared or whatever. That doesn't result in all of a sudden you being more proficient at fighting.
I would venture to say never. It definitely makes it worse.
You get worse. And so if you take the flat tire, I mean, you could sit on the road propped up against your car and cry,
Sure could.
And on some level, you looking at that outside in, you'd be like, I understand that she's had a really terrible week and I get why she's acting this way. However,
we are further from a solution by this behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
This has been several years ago. I had broken my hand, and so I had a cast on. I ordered pizza, and pizza didn't come. And finally I called to check on the pizza, and they were like, I don't know. So they called to check on the driver. The driver had a flat tire. And the driver's maybe a mile and a quarter away from the house. So I'm like, all right, I'll just go get the pizza from the driver. So I get there, and the driver's a kid. He's probably 17, 18. He's not 20. And he's just kind of like staring at this thing. Like,
maybe it'll fix itself.
I mean, it's dark, it's late, it's backcountry roads.
There was some bad,
But like, no matter how long you stare at it, that's not going to change the situation you're in.
I mean, it's only flat on one side.
Yeah. So I end up not only just not getting my pizza before it got cold and having a cast on, I end up changing the tire for him because I'm like, this kid's going to just sit here forever. I mean, he hadn't even called to let him know that he had a flat tire,
I didn't realize this was when you had a cast. I remember this story.
Yeah.
I forgot that you had a cast.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, I get it. This is frustrating. This is annoying. You're trying to deliver pizza. You're trying to do your job, whatever. But you're getting further and further away from all of those things.
It's solution time.
Yes. And we talk about this internally here a lot. Don't come to me with problems. Mm-hmm. Come to me with solutions. Whether they're the right solutions or not, lead with, this is what I think we should do or consider, instead of just,
here's what's happening.
Here's what's happening. I'm like, okay, because a lot of times I don't even have the context for what it is. Yeah. And so if you're not coming to me with, here's what's happening, here's what I think we should do, then all I know is here's what's happening, and without me asking a whole lot of other questions, which is what I'm going to have to do to get to a solution, we'll never get anywhere. We're going to be the kid on the side of the road staring at this tire,
Yeah. People on the inside are the most readily available to come up with a solution too, like it's kind of like a couple episodes ago when we were talking about the idea of hand washing coming into the medical field, where if you just look at it from the outside as a decision maker, as a higher up somewhere, and it's like, okay, people in this ward are dying when they give birth at a much higher rate than this ward, let's fire all those nurses.
Yeah.
And they bring in a whole new nurse, and it's the same thing, right? And so they tried to create this solution,
right,
but they really didn't understand the problem. Right. And so if you are in it and you have that problem, it should be more important to you to find the solution to present, because you get the context, you get the full picture.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way it should be. But it's interesting because a lot of times if you can be so in it that you're almost blind
Yeah.
to what's happening.
I can't remember what company this was or if this is real or a story, but there's a story of there was a market where there wasn't a major like shoe manufacturer there or whatever, and these two competing companies both sent people to scope out this area and figure out what was going on and why they weren't getting any sales or whatever. And one guy came back and was like, these people don't wear any shoes, like it's not worth it, we shouldn't send them shoes. And this other guy came back and was like, nobody has shoes here, this is great, we can provide them shoes, kind of thing. Exact same thing to exact opposite solutions,
right,
because of how they interpreted the situation.
Right. And even that is going to require somebody to ask a lot more questions.
Yeah.
Why aren't they wearing shoes? You know, like
yeah.
we could set up a manufacturing facility in that town and pump out all the shoes in the world, but if they are purposely choosing to not wear shoes for a reason,
we need
it's not
to know
going to
why.
We need to know the why.
In water and then in land all the time, and so shoes are just getting wet and bogged down, then we need to change how we develop that.
Because we could go there and make the wrong shoe.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like there's a whole lot of ways that could go. It's funny because you can post something on social media and you'll get 8 million responses of how you should have done it.
Yeah.
Well, this is what you should have done, or this is how you should have, whatever.
This is how I do it. This is how we do it.
Right.
Yeah.
But in daily life, people are much quicker to come to you with problems than they are with solutions.
Yeah.
Stakes.
It's a fun little paradox.
Yeah.
All right. That is our look at out of balance versus out of control. If you enjoyed this discussion, you know what to do. 5 stars, interact, engage. Let me know if you like the segments that we've kind of been sectioning these podcasts into. Let me know if you enjoyed my monologue and my storytelling that I'm working on getting better at. Maybe don't let me know. I don't know.
It was fine.
It's okay. If you didn't like this, of course, to all those same things, tell people how terrible it is. And we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.